Hello, and now it's time for all things QEP. First of all, QEP stands for Quality Enhancement Plan, and it's one of those things that's what we do to refocus efforts in a specific direction at the university level. It's also a feature in accreditation. So we're going to be looking at our QEP, where in the world are you going, talking about the objectives, methods, and HIPs that we're going to be talking about for the next 5 to 10 years. So first of all, we need to show some gratitude to all the wonderful professors and staff that have helped us come up with our QEP. The QEP was a long process in creation, and they've really created a fantastic document. It's very well laid out, very clear in what's to be measured, and have given us a lot of tools already. They've done so much work for us to make our job easier as we go about implementing the QEP on the ground. So thank you to everyone, Katrina Smith, Wayne, Dr. Salter, Dr. Mullins, Cheryl, Jennifer, Joel, Mark, and of course, previous members of the committee, and Good, and Daniel. Thank you. Really, thank you. It's an incredible document. It's the effort of an extensive amount of work, and we are grateful for that work. So we have two objectives in the QEP. The first objective is RU will provide students with opportunities to take part in a variety of high-impact practices that support the growth of a student's understanding of global perspectives. Our second objective, students will have the opportunity to take part in a variety of high-impact practices that support the growth of a student's professional development. So there are two things we're targeting. One thing that we're targeting is we want our students to be able to develop the perspectives of people from different parts of the world. The second thing we want them to be able to do is to develop their skills so they can operate in a professional arena. All right. Now, you see highlighted in yellow twice, high-impact practices. These are the high-impact practices that we want to use to create students with a global perspective and to create students ready for the workforce. High-impact practices we're using are undergraduate research, internships, service learning, and study abroad global experiences. Let's look a little bit more in depth. First of all, what is a HIP? What is a HIP? What is a high-impact practice? Well, it all started with George Koo, and that's George there. George got frustrated. George was frustrated because of the college ranking systems. It seemed to be one of the ways whereby people would, I don't want you to be in, go away. How people choose colleges. They would go and they'd look at the U.S. News and World Report, they'd see the college rankings, and then just assume that by picking a school that was high in the rankings, they would have an outstanding undergraduate experience. George realized that that's not always the case, that the rankings were really a measure of prestige, a measure of endowment, but not necessarily a measure of what the undergraduate experiences. So he developed the NSSE, the National Survey of Student Engagement, so that he could talk to the students directly to see what their experiences were on the ground in these universities. So by developing this survey and analyzing the survey, he recognized 10 high-impact educational practices. And these educational practices had positive benefits when it came to student retention, when it came to persistence, and also noted that it had a compensatory effect, especially for first-generation and traditionally underserved populations. Compensatory effect meaning that it helped them get to the same levels of persistence and same levels of graduation rates as the more traditional privileged populations. It helped bring them up to the level so that they could be successful. And after he published this with the Association of American Colleges and Universities, it really took off. Every school started new initiatives to increase the high impact practices because it was important that they recognize that the undergraduate experience is why students choose universities. And so they wanted to go about making sure that their undergraduates were being engaged in their coursework and were being transformed by their education. So there was widespread adoption. Now, originally, Q labeled 10 high-impact practices. First-year seminar or first-year experience, common intellectual experiences, that's where the entire freshman class maybe reads the same book, learning communities, writing intensive courses, undergraduate research, collaborative assignments and projects, diversity and global learning, service learning and community-based learning, internships, and capstone courses and projects. Now, out of those 10, we have chosen 4: undergraduate research, internship, service learning, and study abroad. Now, you'll notice we chose 4 in parentheses 5. That's because we're going to be using the ePortfolio a lot in our assessment of our students as they undergo undergraduate research, internship, service learning, and study abroad. ePortfolio has been noted as kind of an 11th or 12th high-impact practice. It didn't make the original list, but it's been mentioned many, many times in follow-on literature on the subject. So we're doing 4, but we're kind of doing 5. So what makes it a HIP? What makes it a high-impact practice? Again, the history here is that if first-year seminar is a high-impact practice, well, that's really easy to create a course called first-year seminar. But if you don't have the elements in a first-year seminar that makes it high-impact, all you've done is created a course with a title. So it was important that we recognize the characteristics of these high-impact practices so we could adopt not just the name of them, but the characteristics that make them so successful. Those characteristics are, number 1, performance expectations are set at a high level, a reasonably high level, but a high level. The student's going to have to work pretty hard to reach those performance expectations. There's a significant investment of time and effort. This isn't something that can be done over a weekend. A student's going to have to work at it consistently over a long period of time. There is interaction with faculty or interaction with their peers on substantive matters. Students want to have a conversation that means something, and it's really great when they have that conversation with their peers, but also when they have that conversation with faculty members. That's when they really start to dive deeper into the material so that they can make the most out of those conversations. Experiences with diversity, so that students come in contact with cultures that are dissimilar from their own, and they learn to see the world from someone else's perspective. Frequent, timely, and constructive feedback. A student needs to know how they're doing, and they need check-in points consistently so that they can change their efforts to get better results. So that's the constructive part of that feedback. What can the student do to make a better product? Structured reflection. This is directing the student to think carefully about their courses, what they're learning, and how it's going to impact them. Discover relevance in real-world applications. This is where you take course material, take course content, and you show them how by really diving into this course content, when they get out into the real world, they'll be able to use it. And finally, a public demonstration of competence. Show the world what you've done. Do a presentation. Tell your class about your research project. Share your research project with the community of scholars. These are all ways that you can demonstrate your efforts. And it's sort of a celebration at some point for these students having gone through these high-impact practices, that they have a product that they can show off, and that sort of makes it a little bit more real. So now, for our QEP, we have these high-impact practices, and we want to define them so that we are clear on what it is we are wanting our faculty to, the opportunities we want our faculty to create for our students. So the first high-impact practice is undergraduate research, and we're defining that as undergraduate research is an inquiry or investigation conducted by an undergraduate that makes an original intellectual or creative contribution to the discipline. Okay, we have several important words here. The most important word here is original. We want this to be an original contribution to the discipline. This is not a summary paper. This is not a type up my notes from class paper. This is understand the discipline, understand what kinds of products are considered original, and understand how you can make a contribution. Second, intellectual or creative contribution to the discipline. So there was a question in the assessment workshop, does this include performances? Yes, it does. That is an original creative contribution. That can be a musical performance, that can be an artistic piece, that can be a work of fiction, anything that is an original intellectual or creative contribution to the discipline. And one great example of this, of course, is Madeline Gray's research project that she did with Ann Good. Internships. So this is our second high-impact practice. Based on these elements, we can posit that an internship is more likely to be high impact for students when it is intentionally organized as an activity that leads to particular learning outcomes. When students apply what they've learned in course to work experiences, when they reflect on these experiences, receive feedback that helps them to improve. When students build mentoring relationships with their supervisors, with their faculty, and with their peers, and when students are exposed to differences across people and in ways of thinking. Also, when students are asked to use their experiences to clarify their values, interests, and personal goals. So there's a lot here. An internship needs to be providing the kinds of experiences where students can actually continue to engage with course content, not just engaging with the filing cabinet or not just engaging with, the coffee machine. We need these internships to be intentionally organized, replacing a student in a specific place where we know they're going to get the kinds of experiences that are going to help create particular learning outcomes. We want them to have rich experiences that they can relate to course content, past, present, or future. And so there's a lot to this definition. One good example of internships is our clinical residency, our student teaching. It's an excellent example. It's a stringent, real-world experience of teaching. Students are actually in the class in front of students, and they have to learn to reflect on their experience and how to get better. And they have to demonstrate this to the teacher certification board. So there's a lot that goes into the student teaching, and that's why that makes that an excellent example of an internship. More definitions. Service learning. Service learning is a credit-bearing educational experience in which students participate in an organized service activity that meets identified community needs and reflect on that service activity in such a way as to gain further understanding of course content, a broader appreciation of the discipline, and an enhanced sense of civic responsibility. Again, several important components of this definition. Credit-bearing educational experience. These need to be tied to courses and to course content. Okay? Just being a part of a service event does not make it service learning. But with that said, that doesn't mean that common service activities that we normally do in the university can't be harnessed and used by enterprising professors to create those experiences in which, as part of a course, a student is getting is engaging with the community and reflecting on that service activity. Okay, so there's room to do this with some of what are currently viewed as just volunteer days. There's room to expand that volunteer day to include what's happening in the class. Many of Cheryl's courses that she teaches in sociology have you could pretty much call them a service learning course. The entire course is geared around the service that the students provide with the community partner. And in that service, they get experience that helps them think about topics that they're discussing in class. They get experience that helps them reflect on the pieces that they're reading and the grappling with the issues that are being addressed in those courses. And then finally, study abroad. We're going to define study abroad thusly: student activities occurring outside the United States in which students meet learning objectives of coursework pursuant to a Reinhardt University degree. That's my definition. It is pretty broad and broad on purpose. We do have a number of excellent faculty-led short-term study abroad trips to Ecuador, London, Japan, Greece. Those are all coming up. Some of them are in progress as we speak. And those students typically are registered for a full class load in that semester. But we also have other opportunities for students to travel overseas, still meeting learning objectives of coursework that's pursuant to a Reinhardt University degree, even if they aren't specifically enrolled in a course to go overseas. Let me give you an example. Our choir went on tour to Italy. It was a rather long tour of Italy. They sang in some stunning cathedrals at the Vatican. So even though they weren't registered for a course at the time, there is opportunity to use that trip for them to gain experience and to meet learning objectives of other coursework, even when they come back after they've been to Italy, or maybe even reflecting back on coursework prior to going to Italy, where that trip really is in service of the student, and even though it doesn't directly relate to credits, it is still pursuant to a Reinhardt University degree. So that's why that definition is a little bit broad. Okay, so these are the ideals. But we need to be able to help develop our students to meet these ideal high-impact practices. So we can look at best implementations. We need to know that some skills require development. What's possible for a senior is overwhelming for a freshman. Okay, so the same kind of research they can do as a senior, you try to get them to do that as a freshman, it might just short-circuit them and make them quit. So we need to provide HIP experiences at the first-year level for two reasons. One, our QEP specifically cites better fall-to-fall retention. So if our HIP efforts are going to result in better fall-to-fall retention, it's probably good for us to provide some of those HIP experiences in the first year. Second, our QEP goal to provide HIP experiences for all students, not just the seniors. So to help with that, I've developed kind of a sliding scale to help clarify what is a HIP, what is not a HIP, what could be a first year or an entry-level HIP, what changes in different parameters you can make to increase a HIP. And so let's look at those. I'm not quite sure what to call this sliding scale. Is it a taxonomy? Is it a rubric? Is it a continua? I don't know. But I've identified 5 criteria connected to each high-impact practice that we've adopted, and I've connected those 5 criteria to George Koo's 8 HIP characteristics. That was back in the slide a little bit back about student performance levels, significant time and effort, substantive conversations, those kinds of things. And for each criteria, I've got 4 different levels. Actually, I've kind of got 5 different levels. I got level 0, not a HIP. I got level 1, possibly a first-year HIP, if in coordination with other categories. A level 2 and 3 for developing HIPs, and a level 4 for senior-level HIPs. So what you do is you score your project, you score your course, you see how they all add up, how each 5 criteria add up with levels 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. If you get 4 to 8, that's a first-year HIP, 9 to 15, a developing HIP, or 15 plus a senior level HIP. Let's take a look at one of these, and again, a little bit of patience as I find it. Okay, here we go. All right, so first of all, here are the high impact practice characteristics. HIP C1, performance expectations set at an appropriate high level. HIP C2, investment of time and effort. C3, interactions with faculty and peer, experiences with diversity, frequent, timely, constructive feedback, periodic structured opportunities to reflect, opportunities to discover relevance, and public demonstration of competence. So this is George's 8 characteristics. So as you look at undergraduate research, I have 5 different categories. I have research question, literature consulted, time frame, feedback, and public demonstration. All right, so research question ties to HIP C1, 3, and 7. That is performance expectations. It's set appropriately high. C3, I believe, was interactions with faculty and peers. And C7 was opportunities to discover relevance. All right. So let's look at research question. So level 0, or not a HIP, is a summary assignment. The research in question is a summarization of specific topic addressed in course, lecture, readings, or other activities. So if you're the professor and you can say, yeah, I told you what to find and I told you where to find it, they really don't have a research question. They're really kind of scavenger hunting definitions, lines of reasoning, those kinds of things. So that's not really research. That's a summary paper, level 0. Now, they might be doing research in which you kind of know what they're going to find. So a known outcome. Professor is aware the research question has a known outcome with clear answers to the questions, and those answers are available in the literature. The student research will end once the correct literature is located. So I know what you find. I know where you will find it. That's, again, not really research, except that it involves a little bit more initiative from the student. You're not telling them exactly where to find it. They're learning some information literacy. And then once they find that topic, they go, oh, well, there's my answer. Again, not exactly research, but it's developing their capabilities. Suspected known outcome. The professor suspects there's existing research that addresses in total the research question, but it's not immediately aware of the literature. So, yeah, I think this has been researched. I'm not really sure where. I think I know what you'll find, but I'm not quite sure where you'll find it. It's a little bit more developed than known outcome. Okay, then we get into levels 3 and 4, in which we are suspecting that there may be indeed a contribution, an original contribution to the field. The professor is unaware of a known outcome, but is aware of other lines of research and suspects the question may be an original contribution to the field. I'm familiar with this line of research. I'm not sure if this question has been directly addressed. So a suspected contribution. That's pretty good. That's getting into senior level. Again, if all 5 categories are at 3, then you've got a 15, which is a senior level HIP. Compare that with certain contribution. This is when the professor is intimately familiar with the field and knows, okay, your research question, that's going to be a great contribution to our field. So the professor strongly suspects the question is an original contribution in a known field of study. I'm familiar with this line of research and believe this question poses a novel contribution to the field. All right, so that is our highest level for the research question portion of undergraduate research. We've got others. Literature consulted. This has to do with information literacy. So this is how deep are the students going to have to get to find relevant literature. So level 0, they don't have to go any farther than a textbook or by course materials supplied. Again, that's not really helping them develop their information literacy other than read it and tell me what's in it. Okay? Compare that with level 1, research, literature review requires following citations and provided course materials. Again, not a whole lot of research going on there, but at least they're having to kind of work their way into the process of, oh, this person is cited here on this topic, and that's what I'm interested in. I'll go read that article. Okay, level 2, literature on the topic is widely cited and directly addressed in peer-reviewed journal and requires student initiative to locate it. So this is, again, when you have a topic that is widely addressed and it's kind of easy to find, it's not hard to find the search terms, it pops up fairly readily, and it's widely cited so that there's many paths to get to that literature. We're still developing some information literacy but it's not quite as developed as 3 and 4. Literature is available that directly addresses the topic in peer-reviewed journals or original documents and requires student initiative to locate it. I'm not sure how that's different from this one. I guess that it doesn't have widely cited. So this is, you have to hunt through the haystack a little bit more to find your topic. And then the final level is literature addressing the question requires consultation of specialized journals or original sources, a synthesis of an array of existing research, and requires extensive student initiative to locate it. So here's where this kind of ties into the research question. If it's that novel a contribution to the field, then people really haven't addressed the question directly, and there might not be lines of research that directly relate to the proposed research. So they have to read a larger body of literature, synthesize what's there so they can see what's not there. So this, of course, is, that's what we do. Time frame. If the student can complete the research within 4 or fewer hours of sustained effort, that's not a hit. Again, that's a put off the summary assignment until the night before. That's not undergraduate research. If it requires sustained effort over 2 or 3 weeks, that's getting there. Sustained effort over the course of half a semester required, that's a level 2. Sustained effort spanning the entire semester is required to complete the research, that would be a level 3. Or if we've got a really big project that's a multi-semester thing, that's more of a level 4. Feedback. If feedback only occurs once as an assessment of the entire research experience, that's not a HIP. If the student researcher is encouraged to seek feedback from the professor by appointment, we're getting there, but again, we might need a little bit more structure so that the student, even if they're not going to seek out that feedback, is still going to get the feedback. So levels 2, 3, and 4, structured feedback occurs at 1 or 2 predetermined intervals of the research process, or 3 or 4 predetermined intervals, or it's ongoing throughout the research process. This would be something like an independent study where you meet once a week to go over what's happened, suggest areas for new inquiry, those kinds of things. And a public demonstration. If there's no public demonstration, it's not a hit. If the results of the research warrant presentation to course mates, yeah, again, level 1. The results likely to warrant presentation to the university community of scholars, like our convocation of artists and scholars. Okay, level 2, we're getting there. Now, again, here in these 3 and 4, where these are where the senior levels live, the results are of the research likely to warrant presentation to a state or regional community of scholars, or the results likely to warrant presentation to a discipline-specific community of scholars. So what you would do, if you have your project or your course, you would go through here and you would score, let's see, I'll go, okay, I suspect this is a contribution, that's a 3. This is a pretty common topic, so I'm going to say that that's a 2. Yeah, this is going to be an entire semester thing, so that's 3. This is an independent research type thing, so we're going to be meeting often. That's a 4. And yeah, I think this is going to be good for a regional conference. That's a 3. So I'm going to score all that up. I've got 3 plus 4 is 7, plus 3 is 10, plus 2 is 12, plus 3 is 15. So that would make this a senior level HIP of 15 or more. Okay? Does that process make sense? I can't hear you if you said it didn't. So I'm going to assume you said that it did make sense. I'm not going to read through all the rest of these taxonomies. I'm just going to kind of point at the 5 different categories for each. So internships, we're looking at the learning objectives. There should be a learning objective that accompanies the internship, not just, okay, go do an internship and see what you learn, but we want you to learn certain things as you do your internship. Structured reflection. The students need to be consistently logging their experiences in a journal and probably also consistently relating their experiences to coursework and to course content, as well as thinking reflectively about how they've grown. Duties. We want to make sure that the duties that our students are performing as interns are related to the profession that they're interested in getting into. Host supervisor involvement. We really want the host supervisor to be a partner with us in the learning tasks, not just somebody who needs a little bit of extra labor to file things or to water the plants. So the best situation is a host supervisor that's open to knowing what the learning objectives are, to providing constructive feedback for the student, and in receiving constructive feedback from the student and from the university about how their organization could help us with our internships even more. And time frame. This has to do with the schedule and how many hours they're going to be out in the field. Same type of thing. You go through, you add them up, 4 to 8, 9 to 14, 15 plus gets you your first year developing or senior level HIP. Service learning. Same as with internships, this starts with learning objectives. If you don't have a learning objective tied to the service event, you just have a volunteer event. You don't have service learning. And you'll see here, I say disqualifying. If there's not a learning objective stated, it's not service learning. It doesn't count. What we really want is to have coordinated learning objectives so that in the process of doing the service, you can go through a number of different areas of the course and build on those experiences and use those experiences as tools to spark further inquiry by the student. Structured reflection. Again, if the student's not reflecting, it's kind of not service learning. The whole point is to think about how the service is affecting you, to think about how the service is affecting the way you understand the course material. So reflection is a really key component of service learning. The service activity time frame. If there's not a service event, single service event of less than 4 hours, more than 4 hours, ongoing, regularly occurring over half a semester, or ongoing, occurring over a semester or more. Partner needs. Again, just like with the supervisor and the internship, we really hope that we don't just do a one-off service event. We would like to establish relationships with partners so that they can tell us what they need, and then in us knowing what they need, we can really tailor-make our learning objectives and our courses so that we're fulfilling that need in our community partner. And diversity. It's best if we can match our students with cultures that are somewhat dissimilar to theirs. So that can be socioeconomically dissimilar, country of origin dissimilar, family structure dissimilar, just different cultures so that they come in contact with people that are different and learn how to see the world through their eyes. Same thing, 5 categories, add them up to see if it's first year developing or senior level. And study abroad. This one is a little bit different. Pretty much if it meets the definition, it's a senior level HIP. And the definition was a student activity occurs outside the United States in which students meet learning objectives of coursework pursuant to university degree. Any activity meeting this definition qualifies as a senior level HIP. But, I wanted to be consistent, so here's 5 categories anyway. Travel is abroad. It's got to be outside the United States. There is intentional preparation. So the students are prepared to go travel as travelers. They're also prepared to really deeply experience what it is they are seeing by having some prior study of the area, prior study of the culture, so they can not just go and say, wow, this is different, but go and recognize things. Intentional travel experiences, making sure it's not just a sightseeing tour, but there are places along in the itinerary where there's rich experience that directly ties to course assignments or to activities. Again, reflection and discussion. And length of stay. We really don't have any criteria there. As long as it meets the definition, it's going to be a senior level HIP. So any activity meeting the definition qualifies as a senior level HIP. So now we know of our 4 high impact practices how to determine whether it's a first year level HIP, a developing HIP, or a senior level HIP. So recall now, After you've scored it, you can come in here and click the right. So this is undergraduate research, and it's developing. It's a little bit harder than first year, but it's not quite senior level. Okay? All right. Back we go to the PowerPoint. So next, we're going to be talking about how to fill out that form that we just saw, our QEP assessment strategy, what we're going to be measuring, and how we will know if our QEP has been effective. This has been a little bit longer video, but it's necessary because you really need to see what it is we're trying to accomplish, what those objectives are, and what the high impact practices are, and how to determine what kind of high impact practice you have. All right, come back and we'll look at the assessment strategy.